Sarah got out of her car as she neared the cute suburban house, and the clouds were low in the sky. She was at an estate sale or rummaging through a thrift store on a normal Saturday morning, following her love and interest. She was drawn to this specific auction because of the odd description. Estate sale, one-of-a-kind antique dollhouse. Sarah was intrigued by the prospect of buying a one-of-a-kind dollhouse because of her interest in miniatures. Sarah's gaze was drawn to the dollhouse as soon as she entered the living room, even in the low light. It was a work of art, a beautifully detailed replica of a Victorian estate down to the tiniest furnishings, drapes, and porcelain dolls positioned throughout the home. The dollhouse was oozing with creepy allure, what with the little lace curtains flapping in the wind at the windows. Sarah felt an odd attraction to the little home, as if it hid mysteries just waiting to be discovered. As Sarah approached the table, the estate sales host, an elderly woman called Mrs. Henderson, warmly greeted her. The distinctive always catches your attention. "Ah, you have an eye for the unique, don't you?" Mrs. Henderson said with a hint of melancholy in her voice. "That dollhouse, as you well know, is steeped with history." Sarah was curious about the history of the dollhouse, so she asked more questions. Mrs. Henderson said that her family had kept its origins a secret because it had been passed down for so many generations. The Hendersons had always been fascinated by and horrified by the rumors that it was a small reproduction of a real haunted home. Sarah's interest in the dollhouse eventually led her to make the purchase. As the deal closed, Mrs. Henderson's eyes conveyed a mixture of relief and concern. Sarah felt uneasy as she carefully wrapped the dollhouse and stowed it in the trunk of her car. She wrote it off as superstition and went home, where she planned to investigate the mysteries of her elaborate dollhouse. Sarah couldn't escape the notion that the dollhouse's little world had a darkness beyond its elegant facade as night fell, and it took its place in her living room. She had no idea that her curiosity in the dollhouse's alleged hauntings would take her down a path littered with evil spirits and chilling revelations. Sarah had spent the whole of the evening looking at the little home. She was enthralled by the attention to detail, and she admired the work that went into making each of the little rooms special in its own way. However, as the night progressed, she began to experience an uneasy sensation. As Sarah got ready for bed and kept looking over at the dollhouse, which made her uneasy. It was on a side table in the living room, its windows obscured by the lace curtains. She told herself that she was only nervous because she'd heard ghostly tales about the dollhouse. Sarah was awakened that night by a subtle but persistent noise. It sounded like tiny claws scraping on wood, but it was really quiet. As she made her way to the living room, her heart was racing. She noticed them in the moonlight that filtered through the drapes onto the miniature floor. When she first bought the dollhouse, the porcelain dolls within were inanimate. Now, however, they seemed to come to life, their little eyes blazing with an unsettling light. They shuffled around the dollhouse with awkward elegance, adjusting the little furnishings and appliances. Shockingly, Sarah could swear she saw one of the doll's porcelain eyes fix on hers as it appeared to gaze out the window. That's when she understood these were no playthings for her daughter's imagination. It was the evil souls of the dead imprisoned in the model of the haunted home. Sarah spotted something much more eerie as the dolls resumed their macabre dance. The little ghosts weren't alone. Even tiny shadowy beings darted about the rooms of the dollhouse, their shapes vague and frightening. Sarah, unable to take her gaze off the disturbing image, mumbled a plea for the ghost to leave, but her words fell on deaf ears, and the dollhouse continued its strange business. The porcelain doll, looking back at her, suddenly started walking toward the dollhouse's entrance. Sarah had lighted candles in the living room, but they were all extinguished as a cold wind blew in the little door with a rapid, decisive move. Sarah heard a cacophony of evil laughing in the night that sent shivers down her spine. She gasped when the porcelain doll left its little home and walked through the room. The doll grew before her eyes, its porcelain features distorting into a hideous humanoid form. Sarah saw the evil spirit turn to face her, its eyes gleaming with hatred, and knew it had broken out of the little universe. Sarah slammed the door shut behind her as she ran screaming from the living room. She heard the ghost's cackling laughter and the scraping of tiny ghostly claws on the door. Sarah was hiding in her room when she learned the dollhouse was more than just a miniature reproduction of a haunted home. It was actually a portal through which evil spirits could access her reality. Her worst dread had come true, and she was now stuck in an unfathomable mansion of horrors. Sarah's fight against the little spiteful ghosts who had been released from the haunted dollhouse was just beginning. Sarah had locked herself in her room since the night had turned into an endless nightmare. The evil ghost had broken out of the dollhouse and was now standing just outside her door. Its cackling resounded throughout the house, sending shivers up Sarah's spine. She was panicked as she looked for a means to shield herself from the evil spirit, but she couldn't find anything. The stories of hauntings and possession she'd heard from psychics and mediums flashed through her head. She needed a strategy, a method to get rid of the ghost and escape the dollhouse's evil influence. Sarah reached for her phone, shivering, and looked up ways to cope with angry ghosts. She discovered an ancient ceremony that used salt, sage, and incantations to drive away evil spirits. She finally left her room, equipped with a jar of salt and a bundle of burning sage, out of desperation and her newfound understanding. The evil spirit was repelled by her resolve in the smoke of the sage and the barrier of salt. As though in pain, it cried out and ran away from her. Encouraged by the spirit's response, Sarah proceeded to perform her ceremony throughout the home, driving away the rest of the mischievous little ghosts. However, the war was still far from done. Despite its diminished strength, the evil spirit persisted in its quest. Sarah's house has become ground zero in a terrible struggle for survival between the living and the otherworldly. Sarah had discovered the potentially fruitful but perhaps dangerous practice of utilizing a Ouija board to communicate with the dead. She was determined to find out why the dollhouse had targeted her after hearing stories of others utilizing Ouija boards to communicate with the afterlife. She gingerly placed the Ouija board in the living room, the dollhouse's epicenter of evil. She pressed her fingers to the planchette and pleaded with the ghost to reveal its motivations for visiting her realm. Words of sorrow and vengeance began to be spelled out as the planchette began to move. A former occupant of the actual haunted home, the ghost apparently met a violent death there. It thought it might get even with the living by enticing their souls into the dollhouse. When Sarah learned what the evil ghost wanted, her stomach dropped. Its goal was to capture her and bring her into its little world to live with it forever. But she was resolute in her opposition to its nefarious plot. Sarah reached out to the spirit with renewed resolve, giving it a shot at forgiveness and freedom. She begged it to release her so that it could end its vindictive obsession with her. A hush fell over the crowd as the planchette stopped on the letter, yes. The evil spirit had agreed to take her up on her offer. Sarah wondered if she had succeeded in stopping the spirit or if she had only postponed its arrival. The dollhouse, which had previously piqued her interest, now posed a direct threat to her life. Sarah may have found the key to the haunted dollhouse, but she still had a long fight ahead of her against the dollhouse's small, malevolent souls. A shaky feeling of normalcy has returned to Sarah's life now that the malicious spirit appears to have been appeased, and the little spiteful beings have been driven away. However, she was haunted by the thought that the dollhouse may hold secrets, and by the knowledge that the evil ghost was always there. Sarah, determined to finally get rid of the dollhouse, contacted a paranormal expert named Dr. Samuel Hawthorne. Sarah wasn't the only patient Dr. Hawthorne has seen who had problems with haunting items. When he got to her residence, Dr. Hawthorne inspected the dollhouse thoroughly, and his trained eye was able to pick up on the evil spirit's lingering energy. He verified Sarah's worst fears. The dollhouse was really a prison for lost spirits, making it a potentially lethal item. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne worked together to devise a strategy to trap the evil spirits within the dollhouse for good. The procedure was intricate, requiring complete focus as one recited old incantations and performed ceremonies. Sarah's nerves increased as the time for the ceremony drew near. The evil spirit had been quiet but vigilant, and its malice was growing in her presence. The final showdown with the dollhouse's evil tenants was something she knew would be risky. Sarah's homeroom became tense as the night of the ritual approached. Ghostly shadows danced on the walls as candles flickered. Dr. Hawthorne's voice carried the weight of centuries of knowledge as he chanted incantations from the arcane. A strange light emanated from the dollhouse's windows as the rite continued. Small spectral creatures materialized, their faces contorted with pain and fury. The evil entity responsible for their suffering made itself known within the small home. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne did not budge from their resolve to execute the ceremony and permanently imprison the evil spirits within the dollhouse. However, the ghosts put up a fight, howling in anger and reaching out with tiny hands to claw at their captors. As the incantations continued, so did the fight. There was a thickening of malevolence in the air as shadows swirled around the room. Sarah had a jolt of anxiety but overcame it by drawing strength from her will to safeguard herself and save the world from the evil spirits. A bright flash of light suddenly engulfed the dollhouse as the final spell was pronounced. The evil spirits' screams of pain as they were dragged back into their little prison reverberated across the space. The dollhouse itself shook as the ghosts struggled against their suffocation. After a final thunderous clap, the rite was over. There was complete silence in the dollhouse. The evil tenants had been locked away and the windows no longer glowed. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne both heaved a breath of relief, their muscles spent from the arduous exertion. The evil dollhouse was destroyed, and the ghosts were once again locked away. Sarah's journey was over, but she would always be haunted by the memories of the dark little world and its wicked spirits. Sarah felt relieved as she said her final goodbyes to Dr. Hawthorne. She could put the terrifying incident with the dollhouse full of ghosts behind her, but she also understood that the magical world was full of unknowns, so she would keep her guard up and be prepared for any danger that could come her way. The evil secrets of the dollhouse had been sealed away, and Sarah could rest well knowing that she had vanquished the evil that lurked within the little world.